Venezuela denounced as an act of piracy the U.S. government attack on an oil tanker off the South American nation shores. The Honduran Congress failed to recognize the results of the November 30th elections, denouncing the electoral process as fraudulent and condemning foreign interference to influence the vote. And the Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs urged the international community to implement the United Nations resolutions calling for an end to the Israeli occupation on Palestinian territories. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belen de los Santos. I'm from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. We now begin with the information. The United States government claimed responsibility for the theft of an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. This is happening amidst the siege and escalation of threats and aggressions by Washington against the Venezuelan people. In a video released by high-ranking U.S. officials, troops are seen surrounding the cargo ship by air and then boarding it while carrying military weapons. The incident was unveiled by President Donald Trump himself, who stated that the U.S. military might also seize the oil on board the ship. With the attack, the United States government admits to an act of piracy, adding to its criminal records in the Caribbean, which already includes the murder of at least 80 people aboard fishing boats, in addition to the criminal economic blockade against Venezuela and other countries in the region. Precisely in this context, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela denounced and strongly condemned through a statement these violent actions. The Venezuelan government condemned this new criminal act, adds to the theft of Citgo, an important asset of the strategic patrimony of all Venezuelans, seized through fraudulent judicial mechanisms and outside the bounds of any legal norm. The statement continues, in these circumstances, the true reasons for the prolonged aggression against Venezuela have finally been revealed. It is not migration, it is not drug trafficking, it is not democracy, it is not human rights. It has always been about our natural wealth, our oil, our energy, the resources that belong exclusively to the Venezuelan people. Finally, the statement concludes by saying that the Bolivarian government reaffirms that it will appeal to all existing international bodies to denounce this grave international crime and will defend with absolute determination its sovereignty, its natural resources, and its national dignity. Venezuela will not allow any foreign power to attempt to deprive the Venezuelan people of what belongs to them by historical and constitutional right. And the Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermudez has expressed his full support for Venezuela following reports that the U.S. armed forces assaulted a Venezuelan oil tanker in the Caribbean Sea. In a statement shared on X, Díaz-Canel wrote that Cuba expresses its full support for the statement of denunciation by the government of Venezuela and strongly condemns the assault on an oil tanker in the Caribbean Sea perpetrated by the United States Armed Forces. And on International Human Rights Day, the Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador, the CONAIE, stated that the country is experiencing an unprecedented regression in human rights. In a statement released on Wednesday, the organization noted that 1948 Universal Declaration established life and dignity as limits to state power, principles that are not currently respected in the Indian nation. The organization also noted that the country had almost 9,000 murders as of November, along with an increase in femicides, prison massacres, and disappearances. In its statement, CONAIE denounced the lack of progress in the security policies of Daniel Noboa's government and the expansion of organized crime, while reaffirming its proclamation that the state has failed in its duty to protect life. And a deadly confrontation erupted in Port-au-Prince in Haiti, leaving nearly 50 people dead after fighting broke out between members and former members of the criminal coalition living together. According to the Committee for Peace and Development, two notorious criminal figures, Didi and Kem Sanon, defied orders from coalition leader Jimmy Cherisier and carried out a series of kidnappings targeting relatives of fellow band members. In a video distributed by Cherisier, he confirmed that the hostages were later rescued, but the defiance triggered brutal reprisals. Didi was captured and decapitated, while Sanan was injured and remains missing. Human rights groups report that the confrontation has left close to 50 people dead, describing the incident as unusual, given that armed groups in the capital had previously agreed to a non-aggression pact. In other news, in California, United States, 8 students from the Anaheim High School were injured when a vehicle struck them at an intersection on Wednesday. According to the Anaheim Police Department, these students belonged to the high school truck club and were struck by a driver while waiting at a crosswalk, and the car veered off course. The police department reported that of the 8 victims, 3 were transported to nearby hospitals, including the driver, and that their current condition is unknown. The investigation department agency stated in a press release that the causes of the accident are still under investigation, although the preliminary report classifies it as a possible accident due to driving under the influence of alcohol. Now we have a short break coming up, but first, remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Honduran Congress denounced fraud in the country's electoral process and serious foreign interference to influence the vote. The National Congress President Luis Redondo stated that the election process is null, void, and fraudulent, asserting that the cancellation of the mandatory use of the biometric system allowed political parties to manipulate the voting records. In this regard, Redondo also stated that this action constitutes an electoral crime and an usurpation of the powers of Congress, where the state is the only body with the authority to reform the country's electoral law. The irregularities in the electoral process have already been reported on multiple occasions by the Libre Party, which has maintained its position regarding the denunciation of the electoral coup that the country has experienced. Precisely in the statement, Luis Redondo also condemned as an act of coercion the pardon that was granted by U.S. President Donald Trump to former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was imprisoned for drug trafficking in the United States.
November 27th and 28 constitute an invisible interference, a direct threat to the Honduran people, marked by flagrant violations of democratic principles and international law, seeking to influence the vote through pressure, disinformation, and economic conditioning, as well as offering a political pardon to a convicted drug trafficker as electoral currency. This represents an unprecedented act of coercion against the sovereignty of a country in the world. It is about our dignity and our self-determination, as well as international law, as established with absolute clarity in the Charter of the Organization of American States.
And also in Honduras, the Liberal Party's presidential candidate Salvador Nasralla joined the voices denouncing an electoral fraud, blaming the company responsible for providing technical support for the election process for tampering with the tally sheets. This way, Nasralla denounced the manipulation of more than 19,000 minutes by the company ASD. The candidate's accusations alleges that the company deliberately caused failures in the system to allow the overwriting of records with results favorable to the National Party. In this context, Nasrallah pointed out the responsibility lies directly with the international company in charge of the system and not entirely on the National Electoral Council. We continue in Honduras as the direct threat from the wife of former president and drug trafficking Juan Orlando Hernandez to single out journalists opens a new front of intimidation against the Honduran press. Our correspondent in the country, Karim Duarte, with more.
Las declaraciones de Ana García.
The statements of Ana Garcia, wife of the recently pardoned drug trafficker Juan Orlando Hernandez, who claimed to have a list of media outlets that, according to her, manipulated information and were paid to discredit her husband, reveal a narrative steeped in revenge and discredit against the Honduran press, according to human rights specialists. They further emphasize that journalistic coverage cannot be criminalized, especially when it is based on a trial with evidence that led Hernandez to be convicted of drug trafficking.
A ser condenado por narcotráfico.
No se puede criminalizar la cobertura periodística.
Journalistic coverage cannot be criminalized, much less when that coverage is based on a legal proceeding, an extradition order, and a trial through which a vast amount of information and testimonies circulated regarding criminal acts for which Mr. Juan Orlando Hernandez was convicted and sentenced as a drug trafficker in the United States.
Como narcotraficante en Estados Unidos.
Analistas descartan la narrativa de que
Analysts dismiss the narrative that the media acted out of payments or campaigns against the former president, describing that discourse as part of a rhetoric of revenge, aimed at delegitimizing the critical press. They argue that only a few outlets, with courage, amplified what was being litigated in New York, and that responding to this with threats constitutes a direct attack on press freedom.
No es cierto que hayan medios de comunicación.
It is not true that media outlets filed complaints in exchange for remuneration. In Honduras, only a few media outlets had the courage to amplify the message in Honduras of what was being litigated in U.S. territory.
En Honduras, de lo que se venía litigando en territorio estadounidense, específicamente en el distrito.
Specifically in the Southern District of New York. We consider it an attack on press freedom to speak of lists and to use a threatening tone against journalism in Honduras that dared to defend the rule of law.
el contexto histórico agrava la
The
preocupación.
historical context heightens concern. During Hernandez's regime, Honduras became one of the most dangerous countries for journalists and human rights defenders, a period marked by persecution, censorship, and lethal risk. Today, the warnings against communicators rekindle the fear of repeating a scenario where those who inform, warn, or hold power accountable are persecuted.
It was during the narco dictatorship led for much of this time by Juan Orlando Hernandez that our country became the most dangerous place for journalists, communicators, and human rights defenders. It is truly concerning to think that once again our country could face a regime, a dictatorship, or a situation in which executions would occur not only against the general population, but also against specific sectors such as communicators, journalists, and human rights defenders. Of course, this is a very valid concern for the Honduran people at this moment, if this electoral coup were to be carried out.
El mensaje público de Ana García,
Ana Garcia's public message, far from having any legal basis, is interpreted as a political attempt at intimidation and to reinstall a climate of fear. In practice, it cannot succeed because journalistic coverage is protected by law, and any attempt to criminalize it only reveals a purpose of revenge, not a legal foundation.
Para Telesur, Desde Tegucigalpa, Honduras, Karim Duarte.
Now we have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverages, and much more. Follow the page and activate notifications to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. We continue with more information. The Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs urged the international community to immediately implement UN resolutions calling for an end to the Israeli occupation and to move forward with the effective recognition of an independent and sovereign Palestinian state. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry warned that the prolonged occupation continues to systematically violate the fundamental rights of the population in the West Bank and Gaza through policies of displacement, repression, and territorial usurpation. The ministry also emphasized that ending these violations and guaranteeing the right to self-determination are indispensable conditions for regional stability and therefore urged states and the UN to take concrete measures and strengthen international protection of the Palestinian people. Meanwhile, thousands of families in Gaza are facing worsening conditions as Storm Byron batters the region with flash floods, strong winds, and hail. Humanitarian workers reported that makeshift tent camps have been inundated, leaving residents exposed to the elements. According to the United Nations Office for Palestine, nearly 850,000 people across 761 displacement sites are at severe risk of flooding, with stormwater mixing with sewage and solid waste contaminating refugee areas and forcing families to move in search of dry ground. Aid organizations warned that Israeli restrictions imposed on the entry of tents, tools, and equipment needed to repair water and sanitation systems have compounded the crisis. Relief workers say the inability to bring in essential supplies has left communities vulnerable to both the storm's immediate impact and longer-term health risks. In other topics, border clashes between Thailand and Cambodia in Surin province have forced the evacuation of more than 60,000 residents, with schools and hospitals shut down amid artillery fire. Local authorities moved villagers to shelter, including one at a university campus, housing over 800 displaced people, providing water, electricity, medical aid, and children's activities. Officials said that they received an emergency evacuation order shortly before Sunday's outbreak of fighting. Villagers reported homes damaged by Cambodian shelling, though no casualties were confirmed. Thai media noted that 800 schools and multiple hospitals closed as both sides traded blame for the renewed conflict.
If no action to taking to hold the Thai army accountable for the illegal action, the situation will escalate. Today, the Thai army invade Cambodia. Tomorrow, the Thai army may do the same to other countries that are weaker or smaller than itself. This will seriously affect peace and security in Thai region.
And Portugal is bracing for a general strike on Thursday, the first one the country faces in 12 years. The protest aims to denounce the erosion of labor rights promoted by the government. Portugal's two main unions have called the strike to protest against a new labor package announced by the center-right government of Prime Minister Luis Montenegro. The strike was called by General Confederation of the Portuguese Workers and then joined by the General Union of Workers. The 24-hour strike is expected to affect all public services and the private sector. Some of the areas most likely to be affected are public transport, airports, schools, and hospitals. This is the first general strike Portugal faces in 12 years. The last one was during the economic crisis when the country faced a bailout and its consequences.
Those here, these workers here, are the ones that make a difference every day in our lives. They are the reality of the country, and they are the ones that live with low salaries, deregulation of work schedules, precarious work, and are exercising today a right that the government also wants to weaken, the right to strike. They are today doing something that is their own right, and that allows for them to balance a scale that is increasingly unbalanced in the labor market by exercising the right to strike. So in this moment of the start of the general strike, there is a message that CGTP wants to convey to all workers, to fight.
And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok as well. For TeleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.